Friends, the toughest three words you're ever going to hear in medicine are "you have cancer," and yet so many millions of people have heard that. What causes cancer? Why don't oncologists know this? Let's start at the beginning. Fungus make poisons. Inside our body, they emit this gas or this liquid or this solid, and they're poisonous, and they induce cancer into our bodies, no doubt. I have a presentation I think you'll enjoy on that, and then later we're talking about alcohol inducing cancer. Kyle Drew is going to talk a little bit about that. Then a couple of acronyms. One is HCA. Nurse Jenny is going to be here to talk about that. Then ADHD with Dr. John Trowbridge. And finally, wrapping it all up with a bowl of hot tomato soup. Kaufman diet. All that and more on Know the Cause. My name is Doug Kaufman. For the past 40 years, I've dedicated my life and even my career to finding the root cause of disease. Join me in a team of physicians, pharmacists, and scientists, and soon you too will know the cause. You know, we want to welcome aboard all our new friends in Houston on KUBE and in St. Pete and Fort Lauderdale and so forth. Welcome aboard, folks. There's always new people watching this show, and I know the feeling. I tune into radio shows and home fix-up shows and so forth, and if I get in on the middle of it, I don't exactly know what the house looked like when it started. I want you to understand what I'm doing. This is kind of a series I'm doing on television, extrapolating from my lectures to doctors on fungus's role in ill health. Doctors know a lot about bacteria, a lot about virus, a lot about protozoa, very little about fungus. Ringworm, vaginal yeast, no big deal. And yet I think it can cause cancer. I know it contributes to diabetes, and I published all of this. So what I'm going to do is show you slides within a presentation, an hour presentation I give to doctors for continuing medical education, because I love their faces. Here I am up on a podium looking out at a sea of doctors, and every once in a while you see, wow, I didn't know that. So let me just teach you a little bit today. Fungi aren't the culprits. Fungi off-gas a poison once inside your body or out in our environment, right? Fungi are ubiquitous. They're everywhere. We can't avoid them. We can try and prevent them from getting inside our body, breathing mold, etc., eating these mycotoxins, eating the fungus that makes these poisons, taking antibiotics, which are mold, being careful. So let me show you a presentation. This is kind of two-part presentation. Number one, fungi make poisons. They can be gases, liquids, or solids. Mycotoxins, they're called, are secondary metabolites produced by microfungi that are capable of causing disease and death. I want you to see that. They are capable of causing disease and death in we humans and in other animals. Look, Clinical Microbiological Review, Journal of the American Medical Association, the World Health Organization. These aren't little boys. Huge. Don't you think every one of these doctors that publish these journals go home and say to their wives, honey, you're not going to believe this, but these mycotoxins cause cancer. They do, really, I'm telling you. They cause cancer. And yet our oncologists are totally unaware. Good people. At all my lectures, I've yet to have an oncologist come up to me and say, what a bunch of phooey. They're probably thinking that as they walk away, but at least I'm imparting knowledge in their brain. Maybe every cancer, every diabetic patient should change their diet so they stop feeding this mold and take antifungal drugs. That's my goal with all of this. Then look down below. Thousands of these mycotoxins have been identified, okay? It's just amazing, folks, that there are, I think, 600 or 800 pathogenic fungi, and each one can make 10 or 20 of these poisons. And this is natural. This is not abnormal. That's the way leaves turn brown. That's the way trees get broken down and eliminated, as fungus gets on board. When they fall down, fungus gets on board and gobbles them up, okay? Fungal mycotoxins, here's the next one. This is interesting. Most of them suppress your immune system. So doctors tend to think, well, people don't have a problem with fungus only if they're immune compromised, or what we call immunocompromised. They all are if they're exposed to a house that has been leaking, if they're exposed to round after round of antibiotic, if they're alcoholic, these things are suppressing our immune system. So doc, don't tell me it's only AIDS patients or cancer patients receiving chemotherapy that are vulnerable to these fungi. If they're in your house, you're vulnerable. They're suppressing your immune system. Then all are heat stable. You can cook the rice, you can cook the pasta, but you can't cook out the mycotoxins that have already been deposited on the rice or the wheat or the pasta. You're going to eat it. I mean, that's a given. You can cook off the fungus. Boiling degrees, boiling temp will do that. Do you know I've read you cannot autoclave. You can't. Think about the colonoscopy tube, reusable. You know, I'm just sitting here thinking, wait a minute, you can't autoclave that metal tube and totally clean it? I'm thinking out loud. Ugh. Okay, next slide. Get this. This is from the British Medical Bulletin, circa 2000. The prime chronic effect of many mycotoxins is the induction of cancer. Huge, folks. Okay, now, based on all of this, you're begging a huge question to me right now. Did you say food, Doug? How are we exposed to these? What food am I eating that may contribute to these things growing in my body and causing ill health? The answer is going to shock many of you. Don't go away. We'll be right back with that answer. Did you know that the yeast that causes vaginal yeast infections is the #1 fungal infections of the male prostate? Now, how would a male get yeast? Folks, intimacy can pass this yeast back and forth. We're not going to talk about that. That's a whole separate show. Right now, we're not going to talk about the antibiotics. We're going to talk about what you're eating, your cereal in the morning, your innocent glass of beer in the evening. Let's go through these quickly. Here's the first one. Fungal exposure diet. Now remember, I give this presentation to doctors, to oncologists. American grain supply is commonly contaminated with fungal mycotoxins, so says the Journal of the American Medical. Corn is universally contaminated with fumonisin, that's a fungus, and to a lesser degree, other fungi and their toxins, so says the Council of Agricultural Science and Technology. Hops, malt, barley. Just take a minute, folks, and go with me on this. Because every American heart, American cancer, American elbow, everybody says alcohol's okay in moderation. That's a glass of wine every night for women, 2 glasses of wine or beers for men. Is it? Okay, go with me. Here again, Council for Agricultural Science and Technology. Alcohol producers often use grains that are too contaminated with fungi and mycotoxins to be used for table food. So the risk is higher that you're consuming more than just alcohol in your beverages. Is that a wow? But it goes on. Okay. This is WebMD, July 22, 2016. A new analysis finds compelling evidence that drinking alcohol can cause at least 7 types of cancer. It found that heaviest drinkers are at the highest risk, but even low drinkers to moderate drinkers, what the American Heart is saying, yeah, go ahead and drink that, are more likely to get certain cancers than non-drinkers. The review of evidence published in the journal Addiction, how fitting is that, also says studies claiming alcohol can help protect the heart should be looked at with skepticism. Thank you. I've been saying that for decades. From a public health perspective, alcohol is estimated to have caused approximately 500,000 deaths from cancer in from 2012 forward. Oncologists don't know that. Oncologists go home, they're stressed out, I would be. And I'd have a glass of wine. I stopped that long ago, alcohol, because I knew it was a mycotoxin. I don't think your glass of wine with Thanksgiving dinner or in moderation, I don't think that's a huge problem, even though they did say even low drinkers have an increased risk of certain cancers. Here's the bottom line. The yeast or the fungus is called brewer's yeast. The poison it makes is called alcohol. The mycotoxin it makes is called alcohol. All I want you to do is think before you unscrew that next bottle of beer and drink it, or have a vodka tonic. Just think, okay? Don't go away. I'll be back with more.
This is beer. It's time to make everybody upset with me because I'm talking about beer today and fungus. You know, being able to see right through a glass of beer is a desirable quality among beer makers. And the reason is because the way that it looks has a lot to do with the satisfaction people have in drinking it. Now, we all know why alcohol isn't on the phase 1 diet. We know that it's fermented, and we know that the alcohol itself is a mycotoxin. When you drink a little bit and you get that buzz, that is a mycotoxin at work. The thing, though, about the clarity of beer is something we've never really talked about. Did you know that the clarity of beer is tied to the yeast itself? The yeast clumps together, and it causes the beer to be transparent. If the yeast didn't clump together, it'd be cloudy, and it wouldn't be very appealing at all. But when I read this study from the Whitehead Institute for Biomedical Research, I thought, oh no, people are going to hate me when I bring this up, because the clarity in beer is also tied to the ability of fungus to clump together. And it says here that researchers from Whitehead Institute said that the immune cells in the body are completely oblivious to fungus when they enter your body as long as they're clumped together. In other words, the clumping action hides the immune system from seeing it. So the thing that makes it very clear for beer is what makes it utterly unclear for your immune system. So when we drink beer and we're drinking this clumpy fungus, yeasty stuff, we're actually getting the most pathogenic or disease-causing form of yeast available. I'm sorry, but when it comes to deciding whether or not to have one of these, think fungus until proven otherwise.
I am always going to recommend grass-fed and grass-finished meat, okay? If you don't and you cook the meat, does it cause cancer? Nurse Jenny is here to teach us something new about HCA. Watch this.
Hi, I'm Jenny Herbacek with the Cancer Connection. The recommendation to cut down on meat cooked well done has really solid scientific evidence behind it. Heterocyclic amines, or HCAs, form when beef, pork, fish, or poultry is cooked at temperatures over 300 degrees, such as pan frying or grilling. The HCAs cause changes in the DNA that may cause an increase in the risk of cancer. According to research at the Kansas State University, a safe way to cook is to marinate your meat with rosemary and thyme for at least 1 hour before cooking. The antioxidant-rich spices can cut HCAs by as much as 87%. For Know the Cause, I'm Jenny Herbacek.
Dr. John Trowbridge joins us today. We did a segment a while back where we talked about when people begin this program. He's written a book called The Yeast Syndrome, wrote it 30 years ago. It's still selling tremendously today for a reason. Number one, $7.99. Number two, the answer is in here.
That's it.
But in this segment, we talked about how some people, and it tends to be if they have a deep systemic problem, it tends to be more people than 10 or 20%, go through this feeling horrible. And I'll never forget, I worked with Dr. Everett Hughes at USC Medical School. We co-authored a paper back in the 70s of ADHD, attention deficit with hyperactivity. And I'd be the guy who'd draw the blood on the kids, right, to do all the testing, food testing, and then I'd tell the mom, okay, here's what you want to keep the child on. I'd win them over with a baseball card, and those are probably valuable now, but it was 30, 40 years ago. I'd give them if you can do this for 2 weeks, Johnny, I'll give you this baseball card. The mothers would call me and say, he's worse, he's choking today, he can't breathe. And I'd say, oh, no, stop the diet. I didn't know what Herxheimer, Dr. Carl Herxheimer,
right,
named after him, or die-off was. Can you teach us a little bit about that?
Gosh, yes. And it's kind of a funny story, because when I learned about yeast from Arian Truss and Billy Crook, this is before Billy's book was published, okay?
Yeah.
I had the answer, okay? I mean, this would just take care of everything, right? For about 40% of the people, it will, okay? Mm-hmm. And fully 1/3 of the patients did not come back for their second or their third office visit. okay, this is not working well.
Yeah.
So we call them and they go, hey, I only thought I felt bad before I saw you.
Now I'm...
Now I'm convinced. Okay, had to do something about that, or we're not going to keep any patients. When we have the answer to their problem, just like you said, back off. Okay. It turns out that when you start bugging the yeast, which means killing them off, okay, because they're very happy right there.
Yeah.
You're disrupting their lifestyle. They have a way around that, so they start trying to be more flourishing, but at the same time, now they're spilling out their guts, literally, and those toxic poisons are causing a reaction to your body. It's like if you have a wet sponge, and you press on it, the puddle forms, but it evaporates. But if you take a sledgehammer to that sponge, it splatters, and that's really what the Herxheimer is. So I developed a treatment in very early times that we use very specific enzymes with and apart from food, and that just breaks it up. Now, if it doesn't break it up fully, high doses of vitamin C, baking soda or Alka-Seltzer Gold, water, prayer.
Yep.
You just have to gut it through if it's that bad. But, you know, we started using the fatty acids to squeeze on the yeast before we put in anything stronger. Really made a huge difference.
The medical literature still says there are really two types of yeast or mold problems, fungal problems. Number one is localized,
right,
and jock itch, toenail fungus, etc.
Sure.
And then very rarely, people can have an inside problem if it gets in the kidney. Well, we talk more and more about aspergillomas in the lungs.
Yes.
Gee,
yes.
there's a fungus in your lung and it mimics cancer, right?
I have to tell you, Doug, you just don't understand. See, if you were a doctor like the doctor that I heard from recently, who said, well, you can't have yeast in the blood because then you would have infection in your heart and you would die from yeast septicemia.
Yeah.
And I go, okay, fine. But I'm still going to treat the patient the way I am because you know what? I don't care what he thinks. We know where biofilms are. We know about these things now. These things are sinister and they are invasive, and I really don't care what they say. When you treat them that way, they get better.
Do you do live cell in your office?
You know, I don't. You know why?
No.
Because in 1988, the government said we can invade your office and look at any of your microscopes.
I remember that. Bradford. Dr. Bradford.
Yeah, Bradford. And I had the microscopes and stuff. Yep. And I'm a medical tech, ASCP, California State.
That's right.
I'm the highest you get, okay?
And a physician.
And a physician.
And you couldn't.
And I said, they're not walking into my office. You know what? I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. How's that working for you now?
I know you know John Ganino.
Absolutely.
My friend John Ganino and many other doctors who have put this big camera and microscope, and they stick your finger and you put a drop on, and you literally, folks, this isn't from your skin or the microscope slide. This is from you can see the budding yeast growing in the bloodstream. Doctors tend to believe that if you have systemic yeast infection, by the way, there's a name for it called fungemia, right? It's in medical literature, so it must exist, that you would die. Some bacteria can kill you very quickly with septicemia, but yeast tend to be partners with our human blood cells and form a relationship. Herxheimer is real. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing that with us. Do buy the book, The Yeast Syndrome, or go see Dr. Trowbridge out in Houston. Thanks for coming.
Thanks. Okay.
Do you remember that movie, My Big Fat Greek Wedding, where the father said Windex cured everything? My mom used to think tomato soup cured everything. So if we were faking it and we didn't want to go to school and we stayed home, we knew we were getting tomato soup. Kaufman, Mom would be so proud of Kaufman diet. This tomato soup not only is delicious, but it's approved on the Kaufman diet. Doesn't cure anything, but you'll love it. Today, the Kaufman diet presents a cold weather delight. Today we're making tomato soup. Let's try to use organic products whenever available. Here are the ingredients that we need. About 4 tablespoons, which is a half a stick, of butter, 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 medium onion and chop it finely, sea salt and ground pepper, 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, 1 teaspoon dried thyme, 2 cans, that's about 14.5 ounces each, of chicken broth, and 2 cans, about 28 ounces each, of whole peeled tomatoes. Fresh basil for garnish and shred it if you can. Now let's get started. Here's the directions. In a 5-quart Dutch oven, melt the butter over medium heat. Add the oil and onion. Season with salt and pepper. Cook the onions until they become translucent. That takes, 5 or 6 minutes. You know, onions, like garlic, have strong antimicrobial property. That means they're antifungal, antibacterial, antiparasitic, antiviral, etc. They also help to flush out excess fluids from our body. Stir in the tomato paste and cook for about a minute. Then add the thyme, then add broth and tomatoes. Bring all of this to a boil, reduce heat, and simmer for about 30 minutes. Break up the tomatoes as it simmers. When it's finished simmering, we puree the soup, and in this case, we're going to use an immersion blender. Puree the soup right out of the pot. You can also puree with a blender in batches. Only fill the blender about 1/3 of the way so the hot soup doesn't expand and splash all over you and the kitchen. Trust me, it's happened to me. Make it as chunky or as smooth as you'd like. Season with salt and pepper to taste. When serving, you can garnish with shredded basil. This particular recipe makes about 8 bowls of tomato soup. You're now able to find this recipe and so many others on knowthecause.com. You know, as I look back over this, today was acronym day, right? ADHD with Dr. John Trowbridge, and then HCA with Nurse Jenny Herbacek, and then BEER with Kyle Drew. Fascinating, folks. It's interesting that mold sometimes off-gasses a poison. And these poisons, not maybe, definitely induce cancer. How do we give mice and rabbits and study animals cancer? We inject a mycotoxin into them and they get cancer. How I wish our oncologists knew this. Thank you for being with us today. By the way, did you enjoy that recipe? Did you like the tomato soup? Again, it won't cure anything, but you can get this and many, many more recipes and the second show. Few of you know there are 2 Know the Causes. The second show airs along with all the recipes every day on knowthecause.com. God bless you. We'll see you next time.